Thank you so much, Stephanie, and everyone at Art Basel. It's great to be on this panel, especially because Alia and I are in a process of thinking about what it means to work in collective. And I think this idea of collective work is something that, you know, is a really strong conversation in the art world in general, both in terms of artistic practice, but also in other forms of production. And, you know, today we're also going to be thinking about this in this context between artist and curator. And I guess just to kick off, you know, we're really very much in the middle of our own process of collaboration. And for us, it's really interesting to think about this idea of collaboration as being a method to trouble this idea of authorial voices. But when you're bringing this complex relationships in relation to a context, how do you even begin? So we wanted to start off by asking a question about how each of you in your two biennials started to build a framework together.
Hello. No, I think, I mean, this is something, I mean, we've had a long history together. So we worked together on a project in Vietnam, what, at least, yeah, 2005, so almost, yeah. It was Saigon Open City. And so we had this experience where they invited, and I mean, I still don't know how I got involved with this, but probably Gridthiya, yeah, she's always inviting me. And so, so we have this relationship, and you know, I think it's just a kind of, for us, it's a discussion that's ongoing. I think one of the important things about that is to say to each other, like, what is this idea of a biennale, you know? So we question that from the beginning. And so for us, it's always been about like not doing it the way the other people has, you know, or whatever the other place has done it, or the problems of the other that we saw from our own experiences. So we start from the position of like what we thought was problematic, and you know, we both, I think, agree with many in many ways about that. So you know, that's where we start, and yeah.
No, I think for us in 2005 in Vietnam, when they invite us to do the Saigon Biennale, we was like, what? Saigon Biennale in Vietnam, 2005. So that let's do it together. And then when we started to open the show, it didn't happen officially, right? So for us, it's pretty. I saw that project like traumatic, and I always tell him that let's do it again somewhere. So Thailand Biennale is a redemption of the Vietnam project.
I wouldn't put it that far yet. We still have another month.
No, but I think we have, like in Vietnam, we face a lot of problems that we kind of like super naive, because it's the first time that we work with another system, right? Because like I never have to propose to the government what I want to show. So the kind of heavy censorship is new for us. And then in Thailand Biennale, it's totally different. Even though we kind of know a little bit about our bureaucratic system, but we still don't understand why it's like that. So this is the whole kind of framework. And then when we were invited to join the Biennale, I mean, actually it was quite interesting because the host of the Biennale was like the arts community and also the city of Chiang Rai and the Thai government. And it's kind of weird that they invite us, you know, to join, because they said, oh, we want the local curators. I said, great, local curator. I want to invite Rirkrit, you know, who's like
from New York,
local curator from New York, but he just happened to be Thai name, you know. And two more local curators and artists from Chiang Rai, and the other one is Manuporn. She's a researcher and curator from Bangkok. So it's 4 of us, 2 artist curators and 2 curators. Yeah.
I think with reference to Istanbul, there were three of us, Uta and David, and Istanbul has quite a long institutional history. It's an old biennale. It has like series of expectations from many places. So I think from just to answer your question on how does one make a framework or how did we make a framework, I think all three of us were probably coming from very different directions. I knew Uta for many years. I did not know David. But still, I think the three of us had different kind of desires and expectations on what they'd want to do, each of us. But framework, I think what we finally understood, yes, we did not want to do many things. We had our own lists individually. But I think what we finally did was go through like a series. This was just post-COVID, almost getting out, so we had to deal with that. So we spent a lot of time discussing amongst ourselves and with other people as well, but primarily to come to some kind of shared stated understanding. So not common kind of principles and so on, but actually to put it down on paper briefly, and not just vision, but a specific related to the Biennale. And subsequently push that further into, again, arguing and discussing and settling on what we called as, you could say, lines of inquiry, or inquiries. So we decided on 5 or 6, so not themes really, but lines of inquiries, and wrote that down as well. And once we were satisfied with that document, which is not more than 2 pages, then I think we kind of devised the framework for ourselves as well as for everybody else. So, and I think one other thing that we ended up doing, which was interesting and probably quite useful, was the first paragraph of this 1-page note that we first wrote for ourselves. We managed to convert and push through the logo of the Biennale into the paragraph. The paragraph became the logo. So there was no title, there was no logo. And the logo would need to be small, tiny, big on bus stops, on television, on every. So it would need to carry that first paragraph. And we would need to kind of grapple with that, the meaning of that 6 lines. So I think that also, in some senses, pushed us and got us all stuck into a framework.
Yeah, I think what is interesting is also how you, as artists and curators, also how you always want challenge, but at the same time redefine the idea and the practice of Biennale making in a way. And, you know, like Biennale always somehow connected to, you know, the history of the city and like always very recent, current spirit, dynamic, and interpretation of a city. Well, I think in Chiang Rai, it's very interesting because like the city has 700 years of history, something like that, right? And how do you, in the end, like you, like with your background as more researcher, art, curators, decide the space, and also with Rirkrit, how do you find the venues? Because like all the venues, I went there even twice because I really like it. The experience to be there in the venue itself. But you offer us also many different layers of the city and the context of Thailand through the choices of venues. Do you think that your position as researcher, curator, and Rirkrit artist in choosing the venue also somehow significant, and maybe also in the context of Istanbul later on, because Istanbul, the city, also has very strong visibility in terms of history and the dynamic. So how do you somehow, because my friend that participate in Istanbul, some of the artists, like they found like very interesting and a bit like hidden venue that people never really think to have the exhibition in that kind of venue. So how do you decide this idea of spaces?
I think for Chiang Rai, the interesting part is we don't have a museum. And I think that is why Biennale is important and necessary for the city like this. I wouldn't say we chose the venue. I would say the venue kind of offer itself to us. Why? Because when we did the research, we will kind of like listen to the place, and the site is very important, like you say, is from 13th century. And the first question that when we ask ourselves, like, how can we bring those prehistorical kind of context, to be relevant, to today. And so that's why when we went to this temple and the museum in Chiang San, which is around like 13th, 14th century, and we saw this Buddhist image, the gesture, it's the open world gesture. So we kind of look at each other and let's use this Buddha image as a kind of the departure point, of the Biennale. And it's the same as what you guys did, but for us, we don't write, we talk a lot. We are more like oral kind of culture, so we discuss a lot about the themes. And then when we went to different city and as well as the sub-district, for example, Chiang Rai, it's different from the last two Biennale in Krabi, which is the beach town, and also the other one, the second one is in Korat, which is the gate of the Isan, area in the northeast. Chiang Rai is the north, the north of Thailand, but it's connected to the other country, for example, Laos, Burma, and China through the Mekong River. So this connectivity, it's quite unique, compared to the other, and it's really obvious. And for example, if you are going to do something in Chiang Rai, we have to talk about the Golden Triangle. But before Golden Triangle, what was happening before, right? Chiang San, it's like it's 14th century, but it was one of the oldest kingdom in the Lana culture, which is like the north of Thailand. And the king who built Chiang Mai and Lana was born there. So this is the reason why we started to, choose Chiang San as one of the main venues, and then Chiang Rai. So altogether, we have around 17 venues, including with like one new museum that the local artists built for us, which is very generous. And then we use a lot of temple and existing site. And I think this is, it's a gift, that the city and also a lot of stakeholders kind of, they really wanted the Biennale to happen. I think this is very interesting, and it's totally different from the other city in Thailand.
I think as far as spaces is concerned, the Istanbul Foundation team is quite a brilliant team, has been very capable. So in many ways, they were understanding what we were talking, which direction we were going, what kinds of venues we were looking for. And I think it was quite clear that we were looking for venues that were visible, that you could go to, that you could discover, that were invisible, that were far away, conventional, unconventional. So we were looking for a range of spaces. And they knew their city far better, as well as the politics of what can show where. And that they would need certain kind of spaces to show certain kinds of work, etc. So I think primarily the spaces were suggested, or a set of spaces were suggested by them, which we then kind of went through. So it wasn't that, getting a space is always difficult, but I think making the spaces work in a certain way is more complicated, and pushing this whole thing of what is a venue, I think that's also more interesting to push. And can there be different types of venues? And so in that way, I think, I mean, while the three of us were quite different individuals and coming from very different directions, I think just speaking for myself, I was more interested in spaces that you can't find, actually. Yeah. But they existed. They had a kind of resonance. They had space. They had relationships. They could survive even if the Biennale was not there. I was trying to see if those kind of spaces could be found, and also just to see, I mean, can a hospital be a venue? Can an orphanage be a venue? Can a chemist be a venue? Can a bookshop be a venue? And so on. And so, and not to take it metaphorically, but actually to implement it and to see how it can be done. So I think we looked at many types of spaces and did get many formal venues and many out of the radar in a sense as well.
Rirkrit, you want to?
Yeah, I was just thinking, of course, for us also, as much as the curators researched the place, the artists who were part of the exhibition also had the opportunity. And of course, we kind of directed them. I mean, knowing the art, the work that they made and their interests, and maybe, so we of course directed them to look more focusedly, because it's a very big area. And I think that was important, that the artists were, actually had the opportunity to understand the place, the context they're in, the reasons why they should be there or anywhere, And I think that was for us really, and the important thing. And I think that's always should be an important part of any exhibition anyway, that the artist that one is curated into is, actually has a real relationship to,
Yeah, I think I take from Rirkrit's and Amar's experience, I think from what I observe also, like it's very important to think about how the space venue related also to the community in the surrounding and like with public as well. There is this kind of like uncertain sustainability as well, because as a curator, sometimes we really want to create a new space, or creating a new narrative of existing space in a way that putting up together with the framework of the Biennale. But then from my experience, I work a lot with spaces that really much used by the communities, like community center. So sometimes after that, they're already asking, so what happened after the Biennale finish? What are the activities that somehow still keep going? So for me, there is also this tension, like once you really try to find like new possibility of spaces, you also try to build like longer relationship with the community surrounding.
Yeah, and I also think about that in different contexts in relation to gentrification, also what that impact can have sometimes in cities. Just hearing all of you kind of speak through that process of not just you, but also the artists finding spaces and this like desire to like go into kind of context and have conversations with people that may not be used to or have lots of interaction with art people. I was just going to think about this other layer, because like already when you're in a collaborative process and a collective process, there's this layer of, there's this invitation for more discourse that's happening through the process of building a biennial already. There's this one layer. But then you have all the other layers that just come with the biennial and all of the other kind of relationships, negotiations, conversations. It would be great to hear any reflections about like what that means to have those complex conversations and further discourse already from a complex position.
I think in Chiang Rai, there was about 300 artists, the association of the local artists, and they felt that they would like to be part of the Biennale, and they wanted to show with us, and they expect that they will be invited, all of them will be invited to join. And it was like, okay, so we have to talk, right? So I think then we're trying to create the space for everyone, how to be inclusive, in terms of like doing Biennale. It's pretty much kind of very paradox idea, right? Of how to make a good exhibition, so we kind of create these parameters, like, okay, we have a main show that we will invite about 60 artists, to show in 16, 17 venues. And then we have pavilions. So we invite people, the local people, and also like local different community in the region to send us proposal. And then we have 10 plus 3 pavilion, like for example, the plus 3 is Korean pavilion, Cinema for All, and what else? Zomia production from Japan. And then within this 10 pavilion, we have 5 local artist community, and then the rest coming from different region in Thailand, and then Rubana, Jakarta, and Warsaw. So that was one. And then they still wanted to be part of it. Okay, we set another kind of side, which is a collateral event, which is one project. We got the proposal from young artists from the other city, which is very far away from the center. And they say, I would like to grow rice in the form of cat. So, what? And then everyone's like, oh, they love this idea. And at the end, this project was like a scene stealer. There was in the front page of the newspaper, and everyone talked about this. This is Thailand Biennale artist, So I think this is quite interesting how to involve a lot of people, not only the artists that we invited, but also the communities and also people that we already work with, like different stakeholders. We're not talking about the city and the government yet, so they are totally like the other kind of equation. But I think this is very dynamic, and then it's for us, it's like, how can we push the boundary, and how can we kind of expand our own perception about like what the Biennale should be. And of course, what Rirkrit said, that we want to do something different, from the other Biennale. And I think this is one of our solutions that we're trying to experimenting in Chiang Rai context. So if it's in the other city, it would have been different, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's good that we didn't have any infrastructure. But in the, I would say that perhaps we have to, it's kind of like who is the first, person to actually interact with this, and it's really the local people, and of course it was a good place because there was a lot of, it's a cultural place, so there's a lot of kind of feeling of art, be it old culture or whatever. So in that way, it was very interesting to see how people opened up to it, right? When you bring something like this Biennale idea to such a provincial place, it's not that they have experience with contemporary art. People don't, they have a contemporary life, but it's not like, and so I think my question was always like, how do you propose or impose something for people to like have to deal with, and the question is always like, how would one read this? How would one experience this? And I think that was always in the back of my mind, But in terms of to be able to layer it up with all the different kinds of, let's say, ideas of the local, help to support like the way for them to experience something that's totally out of their, imaginary, let's say, and I think that was very important. I always find the audience in Thailand very open. My experience as an artist in Thailand since, has always been like people are very, whether they understand it or not, whether they read it or not, they're open to like an experience. You know, they'll touch it, they'll deal with it, they'll eat it, you know, and so it's interesting to me to see how that the exhibition has become, you know, something of an experience, and they could use it, or you know. So that's always my hope, that it's taken over in a way by the local, you know.
No, but I think what you say, even though they are not so experienced with this kind of contemporary language, but the content, you know, we are talking about Chiang Rai, and a lot of artists that we managed to bring them to do research, which is more than 60% of the artists that we invite, and we also do a lot of new commission, and most of the work are totally addressed to the content. So even though they don't understand about the artwork, for example, in Chiang San, the docents know the history and just add it up, you know. So how the contemporary artists from different regions, and we kind of want to connect to the other locality. So the docent, they totally understand, and we train them only 2.5 days, right? And right now they live with this work for like more than 4 or 5 months, and right now they started to do more research, and they added up their own imagination, you know. So it's end up to like different story, you know, that we kind of want them to convey. But I think a lot of people, I mean, the audience really like that they see the pride and also the sense of the belonging, you know, for local people, and also with the art that they interact with. And some of the piece, they wanted to keep it in the city. Yeah.
I mean, it's actually not that easy for me to answer your question for a number of reasons. It's really interesting what you just said, because in terms of trying to find a method which makes sense, which includes people, brings certain things, sustains, and so on. And even as I was listening to you, I felt like there must be more such methods, and one should try to put these methods together and see, you know, what's at the core of these methods, and how valuable that could be. Again, as an artist, showing, I don't have any confusion about being able to relate to audiences, not myself, but for others. Just exactly what you said, it is possible to have meaningful relationships and responses and so on. But why it's difficult for me is that I'm just a single exhibition old curator. And I am a multiple exhibition old artist, so I have kind of dealt with this. And I was quite curious to see the back end of this big thing that I've been part of for so many years. So I was interested to see that. I was also interested to see how does one function in a Erdogan scenario. We have a pretty similar scenario moving quite fast in that direction in India. And a lot of other people have this for quite some time. So I was curious to see how does one do that. I could answer as an artist, how does one do that? I was interested to see how does one do that, how does one function organizationally, logistically, curatorially, and so on. But my difficulty perhaps is that I probably get stuck into I see too many contradictions. You spoke about relationships and so on. And so for me, it's like there are some really serious contradictions. And sometimes these are not stated, and sometimes they are. And how does one handle all these contradictions is actually for me the toughest, and maybe interesting, but perhaps also the toughest thing. So it's usually better, I feel, to be able to at least identify, if not publicly, but privately, what's the real back end, what's the real agenda, who is pulling what, who is wanting what, who's going to insist on something? What is the stated list of no's and the unstated list of no's, etc. And then we find a way to navigate this. So I think that's I just zero into the contradictions. I mean, there's so many. There's sponsor, there's foundation, there's history, there's desire for spectacular, there's instantaneous pleasure. There's just a hell of a lot of things that are playing in this Biennale game. So as an artist, you can do your thing and go, but as a curator, how are you going to play this? And I think it's
so no more.
Yeah, I think it's it's sometimes I feel like it's good to bust it.
Just to make a quick comment on that, I mean, like always as a curator, I'm like, oh yes, but the artist can say it. Like I can't, but the artist can say it. And then, in this context, what does that mean? And is that still possible?
Yeah, so the curator's got to be able to also say it and find his or her own way to say it.
Articulate,
And if it's not possible to say it this way, then it certainly has to be possible to say it in some totally different way, even if it means bringing everything down.
Yeah, I'm interested to continue these conversations on how positionalities, artists, curators, and organizers, and different agency and actors in the, as you mentioned, Biennale Games. Maybe with Rirkrit also, like, this is not your first time that you're curating biennials, right? You did Okayama before something? Yeah.
Yes.
So how do you feel, like, how do you experience this, like Biennale making things or curating your practice as an artist, but also as a curator in general? Referring also to, has been mentioned by Amar also.
Again, I mean, I would say probably I approach it as like I would make any work, really. So, which means like I would like to know more what I'm dealing with, who I'm dealing with, and why am I having to deal with it. And that's really kind of how I start my work anyway, right? And that's a process of like listening, talking, eating, and being with people, and trying to feel things. And I'm really instinctual in that way. So, and from that, I slowly develop a sense of things. I mean, they're like just things floating in my head. And actually, I worked with a curator who's passed away, Pierluigi Tazzi, who I've been in exhibitions of his, and he would show up and he would say, I'm working on a show, and this is the show, and he would walk me through the whole exhibition, from the teacup in the front to the, whatever Buddhas in the middle of the room and I always thought that was so interesting for him to think and to understand why he has all those things in place. And he has a relationship to them, and why he thinks we should walk through that and understand things. So often I think that way a little bit about like, why do I have, where do I start and where do I end in this place, And because I would like to have this, an experience of meeting things that say something to me, but then at the end, altogether, they also say something else, And that's kind of like, and it's always very different. Okayama was very different from Chiang Rai. I'm working on something else now in Seoul, and it's a completely different, and it has nothing to do with my work often. But it has, I hope, it has something to do with the place I'm in, the people who will come, and the feeling that one could get from, having this experience of looking at art, together.
Yeah, maybe Jayab also can edit a bit, like the experience of working like collaboratively with artists and also with curators. Like, how do you co-curators with curators, and how do you co-curating with artists? How do you see this
I think this is
method
quite
of working?
special, comparing to my other project, because I always co-curating. And one time the reporter asked me why I always co-curated. I told them that curatorial job is very lonely, and I don't want to think and work alone. I need someone to fight with. I need someone to agree with. I need someone to laugh and cry with, So I really need someone, and he is my someone. He's a big brother. No, so this is like very sweet, but also very, like I told you, a bittersweet relationship, that we face together. So this is one, I need him, and I also need Angkrit. It's very special. Why? Because Angkrit is a young artist and curator who was born and grew up in Chiang Rai. He knows everything. He knows everyone. And we need someone like this. And I always told the Thailand Biennale, Yuko is here, you need someone from Korat last time. Because Vipash did not come from Korat. So that's why it's very difficult for someone from outside, to do a so-called Biennale either in every 2 or 3 years. It's so difficult to understand the whole context and also the site, right? And I think we are lucky to have Angkrit, to be part of our team. And Manuporn, everyone in Thailand loves her. So no, she didn't fight with anyone, and I need someone like this, not only because she's a very good researcher. So I always look at I think personality is very important, because we are going to connect with a lot of people, and these a lot of people, we don't know them that well, right? So that's why I think this, like 4 of us, we are very good combination. And the way we work is like, we totally kind of 60 artists, we take care of 15 artists each. So this is very straightforward and basic, regionally based, and that's how we work.
Maybe
So I
we
think,
need one more artist in our curatorial groups.
no, and working with curator and working with artist curator is different. It's totally different, yeah. You need one of them in your team.
Anyone want to join us?
So we have to ask Amar, like what does he think about between David Tay and Ute Metabauer, So you are the one in the middle. That's why they need you.
Make us your second. Make us your second Biennale.
Do you want to?
Yeah. Would you want to respond also to thinking about this?
The relationship.
Yeah.
And also because in Kochi, for example, it's very clear stated as Artist Biennale that
Someone
the
from
curators
Kochi is here.
always artists. So maybe, how do you see this, relationship of Biennales, artists and curators?
See, there's no doubt that different people bring different ways of thinking and doing and relating. And if you have a synergy and a kind of positive synergy between different ways of doing and thinking, it works well. And it works very well, regardless of whether, and I presume when you say that if you have an artist, that means you bring another way of being and thinking. Sometimes, often yes, and sometimes probably no as well. So first of all, I don't think that this is a template to fix that, okay, let's get an artist and it'll become something else. So it's probably better to look at it as what is the artist getting, and what do you want to combine and so on. So for me, again, I'm problematic about this whole thing. It's like, for me, collaboration means like you can collaborate, you can have good collaborations and bad collaborations. So what's the essence of a good collaboration? And I think to some extent there has to be some clarity not just between, you can't have, I feel you can't bring in an artist, for example, into a team to curate a biennale because now you want to give it another type of spin. So it's another, I don't think so. I think if there's an institution, there are many kind of levels of people involved inside the Biennale, and I think there needs to be some level of clarity in all of them that if you're bringing in a certain way of doing things, then it can go in many directions, and you need to back that all the way through. So that's one thing I feel. So it's meaningful only if everybody understands why it's being done. And the second thing is that, see, if there's something that's new, it's exciting. And when something becomes, say, 10 years or 15 years old, then there's another situation that starts to play. And that happens institutionally as well as individually and within collaborations and so on. And I think we need to respond to the context that we are in, the context of the Biennale 15 years ago and today. The political, social situation today is very different. Can you respond to it today? Can you change it completely? Are you going to allow it to change completely? And so on. These are also important questions. And also anybody who's into, say, self-aggrandization in any form will ruin a collaboration, ruin an institution, ruin a Biennale. So I'm speaking across the board in the sense that when you conceive something, does it necessarily need to get bigger and bigger and fatter and huger and collect a certain kind of weight and its impact and so on? Then what does that do to it? So these are all questions also that need to be, how do you address all of that? It's not just bringing in a certain kind of individual. So.
I think also we were discussing earlier this idea that, yes, but a lot of, exhibitions and Biennales also were curated by art, it's like a long history of like artist-run or arts-run spaces and arts-run Biennales, and there's a reason. But I think like also the biennial project is, there is this element of risk always and unknown, and there's something about doing that in conversation and with or without holding hands in that conversation. Yeah, too. But yeah, I wonder, we'd love to open up to the audience right now. And I don't know if there are some questions, people who have been experiencing these biennials that have any thoughts. Yes.
Hello, thank you very much. In regards to Thailand, where you sort of placed a lot of things, especially in Chiang Saen, at historical sites, I think in museums, when you really try to juxtapose the past and the present, it can feel extremely didactic. Like this is the new interpretation of the old being something very spiritual or very open. Was this a problem you considered? How did you sort of keep it open so it didn't feel like it was a contemporary spin on old myth kind of situation?
That's interesting. Maybe if we do another time, that can because I think this is the first time that the artists came, and we were super excited for them to kind of learn from each other, and a few of them are really kind of like have a direct history from Chiang Saen, so that's why they just wanted to address their traumatic problem, which have already happened 200 years ago. So I think it's important, even though didactic or not, it's important for some project. For example, the monument number 16, they have been kind of diaspora for like too many generations, and it was the first time that the Taiwan people get together and come back and do some kind of rituals together. So for me and for the artists, it's totally beyond art. And we kind of see this, the Biennale as a platform for them, to continue their own kind of artistic research and also for their own ethnic, kind of tribal, kind of reclamation of the history.
Yeah. One more maybe from this part.
Hello, thank you very much for your discussion. My name is Nadia October. I'm curator from Russia. And we are participating in Art Central Art Fair now, so we really appreciate for this opportunity, of course, in this difficult situation. So we are really focused on international work. We're really interested to bring a Russian artist abroad. And so this is our context, and here is the question. Can you see any opportunities to cooperate with Russian artists or curators now this year or next year? Biennale is an international project, so there is a place to discuss some social things. But my question is considering the fact that Russian artists can't talk about politics, so I don't know what the world waiting from Russian artists now, but here is the question. Could you see any opportunities? Thank you.
Maybe we can extend also the question on how the Biennale rules in the time of conflict, on the time of solidarity, like instead of like making it in particular case. Is there maybe any comments about that?
Yeah, I think we're like in a rolling conflict situation, and it's getting tighter and more intense, and there are many places that are in the grip of one type of another conflict. So Russian artists for sure would have actually a lot to say. There's no doubt about that. And they may have probably a lot to say that we may not want to hear and be able to hear. So I think it's interesting to do that. But to just try and respond to what you said, I would say yes, we need to find a way to respond to it. And as many different ways to respond to it, definitely, but certainly not the way it's been happening for a long time.
Yeah, I don't think about where the artist comes from, but what the content of the work is anyway, in relationship to, let's say, what we're thinking. I don't know, we had some kind of layers of, let's say layers of what we were thinking that this idea was about, right? Like layers of what open world would be. And within those layers, we really were thinking about, and then who's addressing what within those layers, really. So it wasn't so much about like this is coming from here or there, but whether that is addressing those issues wherever they came from. And so that's probably more my approach to like how I think about the artist. It's more about the content of the work, and so, yeah.
I think for us, we did not address the country in our artist bio because we invite a lot of artists who, come from the city, like a small city near Taipei or, somewhere. So I think we more focus on local, not, and we are interested in transnational project anyway. Yeah.
I'll go first. Hi, I'm an artist from Kuala Lumpur. Gridthiya, I was here. I wanted to ask about what you said that you need an artist curator on your team and why. I'm here, Gridthiya.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said something about an artist adding value to your curatorial team. So how could you elaborate on that? And yes.
It's not always, but this is special case. I would call this a special task force. I think Thailand Biennale in itself is very political within Thailand, and Chiang Rai for me is very complex. And in order to make it, to problematize that context, I don't need only curators. And I think artists has the ability to create this, make this complexity interesting. And I think why we our team, we have people like Angrid and also Rirkrit in the team is because they have both experience within the city itself and also regional and international. And I think we need a lot of people who have that, larger perspective and also who can really see what is going to happen if we're going to do something like this, So before we propose anything, we always discuss among ourselves. And I would check either with him and also with Angrid, like what would people say, especially in the local context. And he just gave me exactly, like what is going to happen. And I think it's, for me, for the local case that Angrid deal with, I would call it risk management. But for Rirkrit, it's much more larger. And I think, I'm really strategic, in a way, because I have an art administration background, so I think this is, the only thing, I'm also very distinctive, and I know that this person, it would be like perfect for this team. And he's not only like, the way he see the exhibitions is different from me, because for me, I'm much more interested in content, and for Rirkrit, he's more like visual, and also the way he sees space is totally different. But for us, when we got all these 60 pieces together, and the way we place the work, we establish the dialogue among the work itself, among the space, and also within the venues. So that was, this kind of multiple dialogue that we had between the work and the site. And I remember one time we went to check the site together in the warehouse in Chiang San. And we had a piece by the Hmong artist. He spent 2 days, helping me fixing that installation. So this I need from him. And remember when we did the Saigon Open City, he spent most of his time doing exhibition design. And you go to see the PR, I'm gonna install the work. So it's kind of clear where's the territory.
I'm just the alibi to the crime.
The partner in crime.
Okay, so I went to Chiang Rai Biennale, and I saw there's one work where they where the artists let the people who come to see the work write their kind of thoughts on, I think it's on a big balloon of plastic, and I think I saw one person that wrote decolonize the Biennale, and so for me, I guess that got me thinking how do you kind of navigate this when you have to import basically artists to the to the local area when artists had no previous relationships. So maybe that's kind of my first question, and also maybe my second question is that when you as a curator working with the artists in the Biennale context, how do you navigate when works? Well, sometimes artists can make work that is critical to the different issue. So how do you navigate how do you call it, criticism and how to, please the local people, that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
So you talk about Saraceno?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Saraceno. Many people wrote a lot of things, which is very critical, to the point that the docent did not give them the pen to write because they are super right-wing Buddhism. And the kids who went to see the show, like they write like no, like this article, justice law. But I think it's quite interesting. So before they came to see the site, we gave them a lot of information. So I remember that we had a lot of Zoom meeting, and also we met them before they arrived. And we have a long Google Drive list, and we asked them like what kind of issues that they're interested in. And then we took them around, at least. So it's pretty much like, catering for like everyone's need. I remember one time we have about 4 or 5 vans, to take the artists around. And that was one thing that we prepare. And we pretty much open for the work that they propose, but I cannot remember how many pieces that we did not allow, did not get permission to do, but mostly.
Do we have a problem with that? I thought we just did whatever we want. So
No, but we were talking about the bar, like what is the restriction in each countries? We have our own restriction, and that was like.
I wouldn't. It's not. Politics I don't have a problem with, right? For me it's more about respecting people, right? So I would remind people to remember, we're Thai culture, we have...
No, but that's Angrit job,
Yeah.
He knows.
But anyway, that was my, at least my discussion with some artists, But I don't really feel like I need to, I know what the possibility of the artist is and what their interests are, and I think that they should just do and say, and then people who interact with it should do and say what they want. I don't, I know that that's probably even minor, that like decolonize thing. There are texts about, lycée Majeste, for example, that came up, and they asked us what we thought, and we said it's part of the work. Let it be, and they let it be. So we don't know what the limits are, and I know that it's a governmental thing, and I say this repeatedly to artists. It's a governmental funded event, and for me it's but partly also because it's very bureaucratic. And I want artists to understand that there is a kind of bureaucracy that we're running into. And so as a get-go, but never to say to them, don't say things or don't, everyone has different ways to kind of make their, in a way, like their thoughts heard. And I hope that they would just act and do whatever it is that they need to do, so.
But maybe you can also respond to these questions of how do you bring like artists from, let's say, like megastar, big Western artists coming to Chiang Rai, and how they somehow, like connect to the local situations there, because that's part of the questions also.
I don't think about megastar thing or that idea anyway. I think about what the artist is doing in their work and how that would work. And I was saying from the get-go that I would like an exhibition that's is open-ended, which means it doesn't begin and end at the opening. That it is a kind of process, because I'm not interested in like something just sitting around. And so for me, I do think a lot about how or who that I know or work with that are open-ended that way, right? And capable of dealing with that open-endedness, whether the work succeeds or fail, right? Because it's not like a place where you got air condition or lights or budgets, or it's about like experiment. I say from the beginning it's an experiment, And, you know, this is the place, this is the context, understand the place. I don't want you to just come and just drop something onto the, you know, venue or whatever, plinth or whatever. I want you to understand what you're dealing with and go away and deal with it, you know. And that's the best I could hope, right? I mean, whether they did or not, that's, you know, I would have to say, once I ask the artist, then I have to respect the artist. And that's, as an artist, I always, you know, and then I take care of it, that it happens, that it works, or that we get around or walk around or somehow manage to get it done. So that's more the approach.
Amar, maybe you want to comment as well, but like, no, it's okay.
I think
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
addressed most of it, yeah.
One more. Yeah, maybe we can have one more question.
Thank you very much for this incredible conversation, very interesting. But if we're really honest, we do understand that the Biennale is an incredible platform for giving voices, but it is also the platform that today is facing major question marks, such as environmental. Yeah, is it a global platform? It was born as the idea to unite the world, so the masses of intellectuals will travel all over the world. How is it ecologically? But there is another big question of politics. Are we really free to say? Are we really free to invite? Or are we constrained within these frames of political agenda? So how do you approach the first and the second one? I know it because of the Venice Biennale. Venice Biennale is incredibly strict with both of them. So how do we look at these dark sides of the Biennale? Maybe it's not the best finishing point, but I think it's an important opening just to take off the pink glasses. Thank you.
Yeah, no, dark side is a good scene, actually. It's good to kind of grapple with it, I would say. And I don't think that there is a single answer, that there is just one way to deal with the dark side. It's actually what I was referring to earlier when I was saying clarity. I'm saying if we have clarity on what the dark side is, and if we have clarity on what we'd like to do, then we can figure out many different ways of how to do it. And how much is possible and not possible and so on. But my response would be is that we need to identify what we think is this dark side. And it will be different in different places perhaps. And how critical is it to address it? And if it feels critical, then you get the right people together who feel it's critical, thinking similarly, conceiving of a way to respond to it very specifically. But there is no confusion about it that it needs to be responded. That's all. And what I was referring to earlier was that if we are half clear about it and we try to cover it up, we try to do a spin or half a spin or a full spin, it doesn't really work in the long run, is what I was saying. So, in fact, if you are looking at the possibilities of getting other ways of thinking, I mean, why would you want an artist to collaborate with, just to kind of trigger another way to do things? So if that is, if you are wanting to go there, then why not push it all the way and reconceive in the way that you think is ethical and viable and sustainable. Perhaps it may be so for a few years or for a short time, and again it will have its own dark side, which then again needs to be addressed, but nevertheless, at least, get to a position to reconceive and take the risk. I mean, it's a certain relationship with success and risk and failure that one needs to have. So let's take the risk And those who want to, let's get together and see what does it mean. So.
Yeah. I think that, thank you for the question, and this idea of risk I think is really important. And I think in this moment to think about also being able to speak and be true to this idea of the complexity of this moment and to create structures that allow for complexity, I think is one way to start to think about this. So I'd just like to thank all of you for joining us, and for all three of you and my fellow co-curator as we're on our own journey with the biennial. Just thank you so much for your openness and honesty and vulnerability, sharing what is such a difficult to describe massive process with so much clarity and eloquence. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone also for joining.